So, Jerry, tell us about the bill HB 7069 in Florida. What is this bill?
Well, this was a bill that was an education funding bill proposed last year that basically diverted a lot of resources away from public schools and towards the sort of giant charter school ecosystem that has been building in Florida. And it was sort of violently opposed by public school teachers unions, a lot of public school administrators even, well, most of them, in fact, and was pretty deeply unpopular with most people, with the exception of charter school advocates, because it allocated millions of dollars away from what would traditionally have been public school funding and instead toward charter programs across the state.
How big? I want to stop you there for 1 second. How big? When we talk about charter schools in the state of Florida, I mean, how big are they? How would you characterize them? Are these? Where are they located? Do they tend to be more parochial oriented, or what? I mean, what? Tell us just a little bit about what's going on with the charter school in Florida.
Oh, I guess I can sort of tell you specifically in Miami. Many of them are, I guess, sort of tailored to Hispanic families. Many of them are, I guess, Christian or, I guess, sort of run by more conservative-leaning folks. There's a large chain in Miami called Lincoln Marti Schools that are run by a convicted felon who is a pretty hardcore conservative player in local Miami politics. These are, I guess, in terms of size, I guess I'm kind of unclear on the sort of enrollment numbers offhand, but these are schools that tend to be horrifically underregulated. The state does a terrible job of kind of keeping tabs on where a lot of their money is being spent, and many of these folks, like my friend that I just mentioned who runs the Lincoln Marti Schools, are just sort of major donors in local politics. And
we should say, I mean, because, coming from New York State, certainly there's much more oversight of charter schools in, at least in New York City, because they not just because they get public school funds, because that's the case in Florida as well, but it just happens to be that they have to account for the way they spend to the city. There's a lot more accountability, and it sounds like Florida is just like, here, take the cash, bye bye.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of stuff in Florida runs. So that's kind of it. And it should be said that maybe this isn't necessarily true across the state, but at least in Miami, where I report, the public school system is actually very good. We're very proud of our public school system in Miami. Our superintendent consistently wins awards for his work. He's very popular in the city. And we're very proud of our public school system, which is not true of a lot of big cities. I was born in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia school system, for example, is a complete travesty. But that's not actually true in Miami. And so what you have is a charter school system that is trying to divert funds away from a system like Miami's, which actually is really good and doesn't need to be have its funding chopped away.
And we should make it clear, these a lot of these charter schools, you talk about a chain of charter schools,
yeah,
you're talking about a business. You're talking about a for-profit business. So at least some amount of every dollar that goes into that school doesn't just go to pay the administrators and pay the teachers and the physical plants and the staff, but actually also goes to shareholders. And so money is diverted out of the system, and that's a huge pool of money.
Yeah.
And private industry wants a big chunk of that money. And it seems like in Florida, we are seeing the same dynamic, and I would argue marketing ploy. Look, I should just say this: I'm not against charters. They were established as a means in which to explore other ways of teaching that hopefully there would be developments that would be then scalable that you could take to public schools writ large. Unfortunately, what has happened is this process has been abused, and instead of them becoming a means in which to introduce new teaching techniques, new learning environments and whatnot, they become an ends and basically just a way to privatize public money. And when we say it starves the public schools of funds, we should also say that these charter schools do not have the requirements that public schools have in terms of educating people. So who's behind this? Who is behind the pushing this bill?
Yeah, I guess so. Around the fall of last year, I guess summer, fall-ish, you had a huge groundswell of anger directed at the bill. You had thousands upon thousands of people across the state sending letters to Governor Rick Scott's office demanding someone put a stop to this before it gets passed. And out of nowhere, the governor was tallying the number of calls and messages they received for and against the bill, and it was about 2-1 against, if I'm correct. And out of nowhere, over the course of months, the pro and con calls and messages flipped, and then it ended up being about 11,800 messages in favor of the bill and 10,900 messages opposed, kind of almost overnight. And folks were sort of confused and said, well, how did this really happen? It doesn't seem like anyone really is all that, excited about this. And then some reporters found out that a little group called the Libre Initiative had been running a mailing campaign across the state and in key districts like Miami, demanding people call and talk about how good the bill is and how we need to, promote charter schools around the country and how these charter schools are great for at-risk students. And then you had the Libre Initiative had been sending out they'd written an op-ed in the Orlando Sentinel with no mention of who they actually are. And who they actually are is basically an AstroTurf company funded by the Koch brothers. And
of course. Yeah. Who else would Libre be?
And it's a very devious thing they do down here, and Libre is very active sort of across the South. Basically anywhere that there's a large Latino population, Libre sort of snakes its way into local politics. I guess to fully describe them, they are a Koch-funded group that is just fully interested in collecting data on Hispanic voters. They siphon up data.
Let me stop you there. Yeah. Let's take a break here. When we come back, I want to hear more about this Libre initiative and what they're doing because they are not only behind this charter bill. They have, like you've written about, an extensive network that attempts to, I guess, acclimate, indoctrinate Latinos of all stripes, and particularly in the wake of Hurricane Maria, Puerto Ricans who are coming to Miami. We got to take a quick break. I'll be right back with Jerry Iannelli in just a moment. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio.